Here we are again, the month in touring cars, a monthly review of the sport in the UK. Now I tried this last year, but it didn't quite work out, so I sort of ditched it. It's a review of what's been going on in the world of touring car racing in the UK, news, opinion, interviews, that sort of thing. And for the first vid of 2024, what I'm going to delve into is the current crisis in touring car racing. Is there a crisis? There is one incoming, and a lot of people are not picking it up. Some are, but not everyone. Even though around the world there's been a number of indicators as to what the big problems are. That's for all forms of touring cars. But first, the obligatory episode intro. Roll VT. Right then, we've got a bit to cover. The sky is falling, so I suppose it's the doom and gloom stuff about this tiny grid in the Btcc that we'll have to look at. There's another video incoming about driver team movement in the Btcc and TCR UK over the winter, with some interviews and whatnot, but today it's the hot potato topic. But quickly, this. We launched Motor Racing UK magazine 6 years ago. That's this thing. And it was more successful than I ever expected it to be, mainly thanks to touring cars. In fact, this thing here, this became so popular with tin top fans that last season we rebranded to this. Touring Car Magazine, a magazine that covers things in the British Touring Car Championship and TCR UK that you won't find in other magazines or online. And it goes pretty in depth with features and driver interviews. And there's images from our photo team that you won't see anywhere else. This thing, it's essential reading direct from the pit lane, the paddock and trackside. The link's in the description if you're interested. And this latest issue is available to read for free online. Ditch next generation touring cars, ditch hybrid, bring in TCR rules. That's not what I'm saying. A quick search on different social media platforms will bring you the fans of the sport who type those things. But where are things really? In my job as a touring car journalist, I get to speak to a lot of people about all of these issues. Some answers are frank and open, others are pretty cryptic, and some though are total closed doors. So to kick off this series of the month in touring cars, I'm going to look at some of the things some fans and some people in the sport have said to see what the truth is, which some of you know already anyway. Importantly, the next issue of Touring Car Magazine is having a deep dive into a lot of what I'm talking about here. It's based around one truth, and one that's knocked the DTM and Aussie supercars to one side, and in a way kind of threatened both British Touring Car Championship and TCR internationally. And that is, car manufacturers simply do not have an interest in hatchbacks and saloons anymore. There are nowhere near as many cars suitable for TCR or NGTC as there were a decade ago. And that's just a simple fact. I mean, after all, there's a reason, and I'll reiterate this at some point, there's a reason why the Scandinavian Touring Car Championship is going all electric for 2025, and why the Brazilian Stock Car Series is ditching its tin top races in favour of stock SUV cars, or SUV stock cars, because there's stock car racing called over there. But that's what the car buying public's now leaning towards. And that will impact touring car racing in the next 5 years. But instead of going into detail here, you can read about that aspect of things in a couple of weeks when the next issue comes out. Okay then, I've been going on and on and on, and now you're thinking, just get on with it. All advertising's out the way. I want to hear what's going on, or an opinion that you might agree with. The Btcc is no different to anything else in the United Kingdom in that at the moment it's surviving in a world that is suffering from a cost of living crisis. Facebook, Twitter, videos in response on YouTube, they all say so, so it must be right. Right? Not quite. Yeah, the grid has thinned with One Motorsport announcing a sabbatical and Team Hard slimming to 2 cars. I'm not getting into that. Well, not right now in this video anyway. There are a few reasons why the grid is shrunk. And of course, all of it, no matter which way you look at it, always comes down to money. But it's more aligned with why a Twix is shorter than it used to be, why there's only 5 curly whirlies in a pack, and why bog roll is thinner and shorter than it was 2 years ago per roll. Stuff costs more and you get less for your money, simply. Running a touring car is a bit more expensive than it was, and sponsors have less money to spend on sponsorship. It's not like a top-line British touring car driver is suddenly being put up by 50% just for the hell of it. And as for changing regulations, the entire Btcc contract system is due to renew for 2027 anyway, where everything could change in the regulations. But I suspect it won't be a total reinvention, and hopefully when it comes, it'll not be a carryover gradual change like the move from S2000 to the current rules, where we had a couple of seasons with mixed grids of cars from different sets of regulations. But first, the price of a drive. Now this is based on conversations with a few drivers who didn't want to be named for obvious reasons, I think. I was told of quotes ranging between £300,000 and £550,000 for both the 2023 and 2024 seasons. These prices were not just prices thrown around, these prices were related to specific drives by specific drivers I spoke with about specific teams. There are quotes for prices that I've heard that are above that, some that are even below. But these numbers I was given, as I said, from a couple of drivers who raced or tried to race in the Btcc, and from a commercial representative of a British Touring Car Championship team. Some of the pricing, well, it's down to where on the grid the car should put you. A couple of teams subsidise some of the drives with sponsorship. Some of the drives are priced the way they are because the cars are front-running cars, which, let's be honest, kind of makes sense. But the prices are what they are. These are not teams who are trying to dig someone's eyeball out for a cash grab. There is a lot of money floating around in touring car racing by the standards of most people. But at the end of the year, most of it's actually being spent where it should be. We've seen a few drivers drop away from British touring cars over this winter, and part of that is due to the reduction from 27 to 23 cars. That drop, and the drop over the last few years, might come as a shock if you're new to the Btcc, but the mantra for the last few years has been to cull the grid to something around this size, to create a system of quantity over quality, and to make the entry to the championship something of worth, which leads to supply and demand. When a grid shrinks like this, it changes the price point for the entry into the series and the price point for a winning race car. It's simple economics. One of the things that influence cost is hybrid. The hybrid costs keep coming back again and again. Now I'll say something more in depth about hybrid itself in a moment. It's an area that is misrepresented. I mean, yeah, hybrid's an added cost, but in the overall state of play, it's something like 5 or 7% of an average drive. And if it drives, let's say, £450,000, that's a random number, just like 378,000 or 563,000, whatever. Drivers need to raise the damage budget on top of that, the consensus being around £50,000 for the season, but some will go with less. And you'll need a salary on top of that for a lot of drivers anyway. The whole deal has to make commercial sense. Over the last few seasons for a couple of drivers, some who've received an income as drivers. For some others, there's been a bit of family money to support them. For a couple, they've been able to support their racing through success in business. Some have a day job during the week that pays the bills at home. For others, it's about the full package, which is raise the funds to cover a drive, damage cover, salary, registration fee. And as for the registration fee, one driver told me after speaking to a couple of teams it was quoted in one offer but not another. And off the top of my head, if I remember right, that's £26,000 plus VAT. So no matter how the team is set up, it needs all of that money to go racing. Yeah, believe it or not, a lot of the drivers do actual work, actual real work, from construction to haulage and whatnot. Even if you ever had a test year for junior racing or a club racing meeting or club racing test during the week, you'll often see a British touring car driver there working as a driver coach. That's working, not turning up for the hell of it. It's earning a wage, which goes back to either supporting the race or just supporting the driver to eat, which is why when I'm working and I see a driver from the touring cars at a track midweek, I won't try and grab them for an interview or anything for the magazine. They are there on someone else's time and budget. To jump into that would be ignorant. I mean, this isn't F1 where it's all training, PR, sim work during the week or having people apply your moisturiser for you. This is British touring cars. It's not breadline, but it's a bit more breadline than that. And that's the reality of it. Okay, hybrid. It's something you'll see misunderstood elsewhere on socials and YouTube. In the overall scheme of things, I'll get to the TCR regulation suggestion in a moment, but remember, even though it's been delayed a couple of times, there are also plans to bring hybrid into the top levels of TCR competition. It's being put back in again and again. Might happen, it might not. So, you know, there could be some redundancy in that argument that some people put forward, but we're talking about the Btcc here. And the truth is, if you knock the price of the Cosworth unit on the head and get rid of the hybrid, it is less money. But in the grand scheme of things, it isn't actually that much. I mean, the teams don't pay off the shelf prices for tyres, as an example. But if you or I bought the amount of Goodyear tyres just for just for the race days across one season, which is 120 tyres because it's 3 races a day, 4 tyres a race, 30 races across the season. Put together, that would cost me or you, including VAT, around £40,000. That's just tyres for races. Add in tyres for practice, then testing, and it goes up. And this is the UK, so you need wets on top of that. It's expensive. Teams don't pay that price, but it's expensive even at the teams. Or the rates that the teams pay. You can see as an example that costs a high here. I mean, that is an unscientific back of a cigarette packet calculation, but this is professional motor racing. It isn't cheap. You've got full-time, fully skilled staff. You've got part-time staff. You've got fixed overheads, hospitality, accommodation. This isn't a club racer out of the garage. I mean, believe me, I've worked in club racing, covering club racing. There's plenty of club racers who are running programs that are not that short of a Btcc drive. But focusing on the cost of hybrid anyway, it's pointless really, isn't it? It isn't an insignificant amount of money. It's more than a year's wages for many people. But overall, it's a small percentage of the cost here. And if that price is a deal breaker in the deal, and I'll get to the cost in a moment, then the hard truth is you're cutting it a bit close to the edge. The Btcc and other forms of touring car racing is always hit with teams that can't quite afford to do it properly. So at this level, do you want that there? The only thing, well, the thing about hybrid, and I'm only hammering on because there are a few misinformed people out there, is it is a fixed cost leased item. You pay one chunk of money for the season. It's different with consumables, tyres, fuel, oil, bacon sandwiches. Bacon. Sausage even. What was I saying? Consumables, tyres, fuel, oil, bacon. They're all dependent on usage. If you miss a race on a weekend with a technical problem, you save a set of tyres. Most unused tyres can be carried over. If you don't race, you don't race. But you'll save £1,000 or more there. That's one way of looking at it in terms of unused consumables. The other side of it is if you do a lot of pre-season testing, those consumable costs go up. But the hybrid is a single price. Initially in 2022 it was 20 grand for the year. Around £30,000 for the season, I've been told. If it fails, it's replaced. At the end of the season, the units are taken away and serviced or replaced. And yeah, they are fantastic bits of kit. But think about this with the tech. They're only 48 volts. They're a mild hybrid. They don't go over the threshold where martial training and special equipment's needed. So that cost isn't there to be absorbed. In fact, the Btcc hybrids conform to Formula E standards, even though they are miles below that kind of output. They are actually rated at 3 years before any power degradation sets in, but the teams don't actually own them. Like I said, they're leased at a fixed cost. And it's not like teams are employing a team of extra people to look after them. The Btcc hybrid, according to Cosworth, can run for 10,000 miles or 100 hours before being serviced. They overhaul every pack at the end of the year. To put it into context, across a Btcc season, all practice, qualifying and races combined equate to around 3 hours per race weekend, which is 30 hours a season, way below the 100. Add on a single day of in-season testing and 20-minute shakedowns before each race weekend. It's well within the parameters. And now the reliability, according to Toka, it's equalled any other standard component. Hybrid's not going anywhere. If it's £30,000 from the full budget, then no, it's not the problem. If there is a problem, hybrid systems not killing off teams. Well, not now at least. Arguably they did in 2022, but you know, like I said, that's an opinion I've formed from talking to people within teams in British touring cars, from the front of the grid to the back of the grid. Some people still see hybrids are a complete pain in the rear, but that's a story for a different day. We're talking about costs here. Another cost that has come up while talking to people within the sport on a professional basis is the law of diminishing returns. There was an excellent piece in the November 30th issue of Autosport last year where the great journalist Marcus Simmons spoke with Napa Racing about the development of the Ford Focus as they led into the 2023 season. They told him, and I have spoke with people at Napa myself, but this is on record in the magazine, and I've spoke to other teams about it as well, who've got their opinion, but they told him in the magazine that almost every external panel on the car is being looked at. All the fixtures, all the fittings, the mountings, the cooling, everything. Not just changes to the car, but the operating procedures, just to find if there's any areas that were not being maximised. It costs money to do that. And they made a small jump from the rivals. Not as big as you think. Have a look at the mag. You can read what Tom Ingram told us about. Rather than being a huge gap between Napa and Accelerate, Napa were just out of reach and they were consistent. I mean, I was having Accelerate tests for pre-season last year. 2 exclusive days they had at Croft, ran without hybrid incidentally. It was pre-season running takes place sometimes without hybrid, which was the case there. And honestly, though, when you see the size of the teams to run 4 cars for 2 days and think they had the track to themselves, you begin to really understand that the British Touring Car Championship is a high-end championship. It's far from being achievable on a wing and a prayer. I mean, if you watch the latest series of Btcc on the limit on YouTube, you'll see PMR boss Adam Weaver speak about the price of developing small parts in terms of aero for the car, and that's now where costs are rising as teams try to max out what they have. You've got to remember that the British Touring Car Championship is similar to Formula 1 and the World Endurance Championship, in that, for the most part, development in free areas is allowed. And that's an area that can be a bit of a money pit. And if you've got a team capable of developing a car further, you're going to do it. Not everybody's at that level. Before journalism, when I was working in Formula One, in composites, I remember during a fairly stable time in the regulations, you'd see components on the car develop through a season and year on year, like, say, a steering column. I remember making steering columns through a particular season for a team where the outer diameter, which is the outside of the steering column, remained the same. But the ID, the inside diameter, it changed. It got thinner and thinner. And some of the materials, some of the types of carbon composite and the pre-preg in them were changed during the year in terms of, because of flexibility, control, strength, weight. The way that they were mounted onto the car changed. It was the same with other components that we work with, but instigating lots of those tiny changes for lots of tiny gains costs money. In F1 back then, though, you get all these things together and you'd go and test every other week. Testing cost is a thing. In the Btcc, you can test unrestricted up until media day. So there you go. That's a choice-based cost. Again, if you read the mag, which is currently free online, you can see Josh Cook talking about the price of running these cars rising over the last few years. Development is one of those things. But we're also in a depressed financial state nationally. It's harder for drivers to raise budgets. Once again, a plug. 52 pages of touring cars this. In the feature interview of the latest issue, Dan Rowbottom, Dan spoke to me about a number of issues, and one was raising the budget to race. And it was very interesting to see his perspective on the whole state of things. The most pointed comment he made, I felt, and it's a good 8-10 page interview. The comment that he made, and I felt it was fairly pointed about many teams, was that he said they're now operating solely on a basis of waiting for drivers to come with the cash instead of raising more budget on their own to support them. Naturally, teams do have sponsors that offset that, some better than others. But in his opinion, when we spoke, he said most teams need to do more. He believes that some of them could do with a small commercial department or even a freelancer. I mean, there are some potential sponsors out there that would align better with a team than an individual driver. And if they're not presented with a package, they're not going to get involved. So why not chase them down? And also, as Dan said, at some point, this system, the drivers will not be able to turn up with the required budget. And the system of working like that will break. You can kind of hear the strains of that right now on that front. And that's another thing. A bigger grid dilutes the pot. A grid of 23 cars means that it changes the chance to grab a sponsor or partner who wants to be involved in British touring cars. It still doesn't make it easy, but your potential slice of the sponsor pie should theoretically now become bigger. I mean, the Btcc to the uninitiated might look like a series where manufacturers are heavily involved. They're not. There isn't loads of factory money like there was in the 1990s. Okay, there are 4 teams in the manufacturer area of the championship competing as such. Hyundai. I'll always call them Hyundai. I'd rather tell you Hyundai or whatever, but Hyundai. Them and Ford have a bit of involvement, but it's the teams that have developed the cars at their own expense for the most part. Ford and Hyundai are not throwing technology and unlimited cash at engine developers Swindon and Mountune to develop the power units. It's similar with the Toyota and BMW situation where they both have Neil Brown engines. Toyota and BMW aren't throwing loads of money right now at those cars or those engines. And even if they did, it's one area where you'd be pegged back if you gained an advantage anyway. TOCA, who run British touring cars, are actively against that. They try to create parity. If you spent, say, £10 million on an engine improvement, I'll give you 30 bhp extra, it would just be wound back. Hence why some teams opt for the Toker engine, which, if you don't know about touring cars, is an engine produced by M Sport at any team. Hence why some teams opt for the Toker engine, which, if you don't know, is an engine produced by M Sport that any team can lease, and with balanced performance should have a similar power to any manufacturer engine. That's just to try and level the playing field. Currently it's in the Power Max Racing Astra, which is a car that went out of production a couple of years ago. The team are independent now. It's also in the Cupra. As for the Cupra itself as a car, Team Hard built and developed that. In fact, if I remember rightly, early in the first season, they had to cannibalise road cars for spare parts because Cupra are not interested. They're only interested in the TCR route, which leads to another area. And that's the question that a lot of people bring up, or an opinion that a lot of people have. Why doesn't the Btcc switch to TCR regulations? I've heard that question time and time again. And I cover most British touring car and TCR UK Championship races from within the paddock, and I've done for a while. Know quite a lot of people there. There's opinions. I'm sure if it was on the table, a deal could be hammered out for British touring cars to go TCR, but there would have to be a desire. And the truth is, the TCR rule set is not the answer that those people think it is for British touring cars. Because the thing that keeps popping up is this, and I've seen it many times: a TCR car is cheap. Yes, it is. In comparison to a British touring car, maybe it's not. See right there, a touring car is not a cheap type of race car, and a TCR car has a price cap, and I think it's currently around about €148,000 for a new one. But those cars are subsidised. They are built by the manufacturer or a manufacturer's agent, like Yas Motorsport do for Honda. The development costs, though, mean that some cars, like the current Toyota Corolla, is a loss-making car for Toyota, as officially manufacturers can't run teams in TCR racing. Okay, manufacturers gain something from the PR side of things if a TCR car wins a championship or wins races or wins an important race. But are they going to give British touring cars enough special treatment? I mean, on cost, just think, just for a moment, how much it would cost, or how much it did cost, to build that first Power Max Racing Astra for the British Touring Car Championship. A chassis that's now going into its 8th season. That initial build setup for 8 seasons, actually it's not as simple as that, because there's rebuilds and redesigns as it goes on. But by the time it has to retire, it'll have had 10 years of running. So when you split the costs across 10 years, is it really that expensive in comparison to other types of touring cars? After all, people think year on year the car costs this. You are not entering the British Touring Car Championship with a single year business plan. Much of the work on a NGTC car would be the same as the TCR car, and frankly, the biggest cost in all of that is labour. I mean, over the period of 5 years, 10 years, there would not be much difference between running the two in the same kind of level of championship. I mean, buying a new or used TCR car is cheaper than designing and building a new British touring car. But apart from that, you know, it's not as simple as just switching. For a start, World Sports Communications hold the rights to the TCR formula. There would have to be a deal to accommodate that in the British touring cars, and I doubt WSC would give up any intellectual property rights for another set of regulations, because I'm sure the British Touring Car Championship and teams would want to develop their own cars, or even build their own cars to TCR rules. Now, physically building a car to TCR rules, which it's not currently allowed by an independent, it might be cheaper than building an NGTC car, but the research and design process, well, if I entered a championship and said I'm building my own TCR car, and let's just say I chose a Ford Focus. Somebody's done a Ford Focus before, but let's just say I chose a Ford Focus. I'm going up against cars that have been designed with a major manufacturer budget and major manufacturer facilities. You know, Toyota, Cupra, even Honda. You're going up against some pretty serious brain power. If you were allowed to build cars to TCR rules, in that sense, you'd be on a hiding to nothing. I'm sure that TOCA would prefer to retain legal control over whatever spec they run next when new regulations come in 2027. I mean, after all, TCR is a global balance of performance set up as a series goes. Would a championship like Btcc be happy if a car that was being successful in South America or Asia changed the balance of performance during the season on a car over here that was in the title fight? I don't think so. I mean, I know through speaking to people in both British touring car and TCR paddock that there are some very strong opinions. And I'm sure that TOCA would prefer to retain legal control over whatever specs they run. After all, TCR is a global balance of performance setup. Would they be happy if a car that won in South America changed the balance of performance of a car over here in the title fight? I think not. I know through speaking to people in both the British touring car and TCR UK paddock that there are people with strong opinions. I've spoken to drivers who've raced or tested both types of cars. Dan Lloyd, Ash Sutton, Carl Baldley, Chris Smiley, TCR UK boss Stuart Lyons, Nick Halstead, a few others. People who've run the cars as well. And they'll tell you they do require different types of work, different driving styles. They're not that far apart. But that's not an issue that comes up. The thing that keeps coming up is a belief that a TCR car is not suitable to 3 races a day because of the risk of front-end damage rendering the car unable to race. It doesn't have the front clip removal option of a Btcc machine. There's some damage in Btcc that would put a TCR car on a jig on a race day, which wouldn't allow it to be sorted. But the truth is there's actually very rarely any incidents of that kind of magnitude anyway. But a bigger problem is one that I touched on earlier. Nobody's really interested in building TCR cars. They are saloons and hatchbacks. They are touring cars, and manufacturers are losing interest in building those types of cars. It's why the DTM has become GTM now. It's why supercars in Australia are only running 2 types of American muscle car, one of which is no longer available, and that's because they don't build Fords in Australia anymore, and Holden don't exist anymore. And the types of cars that we're known for in Australia, you don't really buy. Around the world, especially the developed world and developing world, it's now an onus on EV and SUV. It's why, as I mentioned before, Scandinavian touring cars are changing. They're going all electric. It's why in Brazil the Toyota Corolla and Chevrolet Cruze are being replaced with SUVs next year. Hell, if you check out the Touring Car Register website, you can read about how Thorny Motorsport back in 2012 had the idea of running an NGTC Land Rover Evoque. Evoque, I don't know what you call them. I didn't like them, but you know the rules allow for it. Well, in the Btcc, I mean, there's a claim that Land Rover didn't want them to run the car. That was in the article on Touring Car Register, check it out. But I wonder if Land Rover would have that attitude now with those type of cars. SUVs, crossovers, you know. So the next time someone throws the idea that hybrid units have priced teams and drivers out of the BBC and is killing the Btcc, just think about the bigger picture. Right then, the photos and video footage in this video, all created by me, as an accredited official touring car photographer and journalist, all with relevant permissions. The videos were shot at times that was complying with Btcc regulations, i.e. cars that you see on track moving are from testing and media days, not race weekends. So they comply with all the relative agreements. If you want access to any kind of footage like that, or a lot more that's not used here, and photos, just get in touch if you want to use them. It's better than ripping them from vids and photos online than claiming section 107 copyright, because frankly it's a misused piece of bullshit that means nothing at all, and I don't have a problem with sharing. If you want to subscribe to find out what's going on in touring car racing in 2024, then please do. Give the video a like or a dislike, be honest, and share your thoughts with a comment. Right then, toodle pip. Thanks for watching. I'm off for some of that bacon that I mentioned earlier now.